I never thought I'd be telling this story, not like this. But after everything that's happened, I need to get it off my chest. It's been 5 years, and only now is the truth finally coming to light. 5 years of pain, of exile, of questioning everything I ever knew. And it all started on a day that was supposed to be one of the happiest in our family's history. Let's go back to where it all began. I grew up in Brookhaven, a small town where everyone knew each other's business. My cousin, Danny, and I were inseparable from childhood. We shared family trips, sleepovers, and dumb adventures that often ended in scraped knees and scoldings from our moms. Our mothers were sisters, which meant we weren't just cousins. We were practically brothers. Danny had been with Emma for years. She lived 3 houses down from us growing up, the girl next door in every sense of the word. We all grew up together, and by the time Danny and Emma finally started dating in college, everyone saw it as inevitable. The family adored them. My grandmother cried tears of joy when they got engaged. And then came the wedding. It was supposed to be a perfect summer day. The venue was simple but elegant, the kind of place you see in wedding magazines. Picturesque gardens, a rustic barn for the reception, twinkling fairy lights hanging from the beams. As one of Danny's groomsmen, I got there early to help set up, wearing a suit I'd spent way too much money on for someone who barely attended formal events. The day started normally. I was directing guests, pinning on boutonnieres, and chatting with Danny's best man, Aaron, when everything came crashing down. One moment, I was helping an elderly couple find their seats, and the next, I was on the ground, my vision exploding into white-hot pain. It took a few seconds for me to realize what had happened. Danny was on top of me, fists flying, rage twisting his face into something unrecognizable. I barely had time to react. The pain in my jaw registered a split second before the coppery taste of blood flooded my mouth. I tried to shield myself, arms raised, but Danny was relentless. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal, fury, something deeper and more venomous than I could comprehend. "You lying piece of shit," he screamed. "How could you do this to me?" I was still dazed, my head spinning from the punches, when I heard the voices around us. Someone was yelling for him to stop. Hands were pulling him off me. The crowd had gathered, shocked murmurs and horrified gasps filling the air. I struggled to sit up, blinking through the haze, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. My lip was split. My left eye was already swelling shut. I could hear someone sobbing, and then the words that shattered my world. "You were sleeping with Emma." I froze. It was as if the universe had just punched me in the gut harder than Danny ever could. Emma? My cousin's fiancée? The girl who was practically a little sister to me? No, this had to be a mistake. I turned my head, searching for her in the crowd. And there she was, standing a few feet away, tears streaming down her face. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Danny, and she was shaking her head. "No, Danny," she sobbed. "I never." "Don't lie to me," he shouted. "Everyone knows. You think I'm an idiot? You think I wouldn't find out?" My heart pounded against my ribs. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. A strong hand gripped my shoulder. Aaron, still breathless from pulling Danny off me, knelt beside me. "Dude," he muttered, voice low. "You need to go. Now." "What?" My voice came out hoarse. "Go where?" I wouldn't. His jaw tightened. "They're not listening." I looked around. The family, the people who had known me my entire life, were staring at me like I was a stranger. No worse, like I was a monster. Danny's mother, my own aunt, had her hands over her mouth, eyes filled with disgust. My father stood rigid, his expression unreadable. My mother, God, my mother, was crying. It hit me all at once. They believed it. They actually believed it. I forced myself to stand, my entire body aching. "I didn't do this," I said, my voice steady despite the sheer terror clawing at my throat. "You all know me. You know I wouldn't." But the silence told me everything I needed to know. They didn't care what I had to say. The truth didn't matter. I turned and walked away, barely able to see past the tears burning in my eyes. An hour later, I got the text from my father. "Your things are packed. Don't come back." My hands shook as I read the words. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. I tried my mother. No answer. My sister. Silence. I tried Emma. Blocked. The people I had loved and trusted my whole life had turned their backs on me in an instant. And I had no idea why I don't remember driving home that night. The world outside my car windows blurred into streaks of headlights and neon signs, but I wasn't seeing any of it. My hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. My pulse was still pounding in my ears. They believed it. Not one person had questioned it. Not my dad, not my mom, not even my sister. They had packed up my life like I was a stray animal being tossed into the street. By the time I pulled up to my apartment, my phone had exploded with texts. Some were from extended family, others from old friends, all of them the same variation of disgust. How could you? Danny loved you, man. I always knew something was off about you. You're dead to us. The only message I actually opened was from Emma. I don't know what's happening. I swear I didn't say anything. I never said anything. I stared at it for a long time, reading it over and over, searching for any clue, any hint of what the hell was happening. But then the next message came. Please don't call me. It'll only make things worse. Worse. Worse than being publicly humiliated, beaten to a pulp, disowned by my own blood. I shut off my phone, tossed it across the room, and let the silence swallow me. The days that followed were hell. I couldn't go to work, partly because my body was still aching from Danny's fists, partly because I couldn't stomach the idea of pretending everything was normal. The few friends I had outside of my family, they stopped returning my calls. Even my usual gym, my coffee shop, my grocery store, places that had always been background noise in my life, had suddenly become hostile territory. People whispered when they saw me. A few even turned and walked the other way. Brookhaven was too small for something like this to stay quiet. I tried to fight back. I called my mom. No answer. I texted my dad. No reply. I even drove to my sister's place, knocked on her door for 20 minutes before she finally answered. Her face was stony, cold, like she didn't even recognize me. Go home, Nate, she said. Jules, come on, I pleaded. You really think I would do this? You know me. She crossed her arms, lips pressed tight. I thought I did. That hurt more than the punches. Then tell me who said it, I demanded. Who started this? Who? It doesn't matter, she cut in. Danny saw what he saw. That's all that matters. I blinked. Saw what? Jules hesitated, just for a second. Then she steeled herself. He saw the texts. What texts? But she was already closing the door. That night, I drank myself into oblivion. I wasn't much of a drinker before, but sitting alone in my dark apartment, everything in my life crumbling around me, I didn't know what else to do. By the time I woke up, my head was pounding, my mouth dry as sandpaper. I barely registered the sound of knocking at first, assuming it was my hangover playing tricks on me. But then it came again. Louder. I groaned, dragged myself to my feet, and cracked open the door. And there she was. Emma. Her hair was pulled back, her face pale, dark circles beneath her eyes. She looked just as wrecked as I felt. You can't be here, I said, my voice hoarse. I know, she whispered. Then she shoved a phone into my hands. I frowned. What is this? Just read, she said. So I did. And my world cracked open all over again. There were texts. Hundreds of them. Supposedly from me. Flirty messages. Secret meetups. Late-night confessions of love. But I had never sent a single one of them. They weren't real. And suddenly, the truth came crashing down. Someone had set me up. The room felt like it was tilting as I scrolled through the messages on Emma's phone. My own name, my own number, but the words, I had never typed a single one of them. I can't stop thinking about you, Em. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. Danny doesn't see you the way I do. He doesn't deserve you. Meet me behind the cafe. Us, just for a little while. It was me, but it wasn't. I swallowed hard, the weight of what I was looking at making my stomach twist into knots. Emma was watching me, arms wrapped tightly around herself. I swear, I never responded to these. I never even saw them until Danny showed me on the morning of the wedding. He was shaking, Nate. He thought I was lying when I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. I looked at her, the sheer panic in her eyes, and suddenly I wasn't just angry. I was terrified. Someone had gone to incredible lengths to ruin us. These messages, I managed to say, my voice thick. Where did they come from? Emma exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I don't know. Danny wouldn't tell me. He just kept saying that his source was solid, that he saw the proof himself. I gritted my teeth. Who? Emma hesitated. I think it was Olivia. I blinked. Olivia? She nodded. Danny's coworker. They started working together about a year ago. I barely knew her. I'd met her once at a family gathering, introduced as Danny's work friend. She was nice enough, I supposed, but nothing about her had ever stood out to me. And yet, she was the one who had started all of this? Why would she do this? I demanded. What does she get out of destroying my life? Emma looked miserable. I don't know, but I do know that Danny believed her over me. Over you. Something inside me broke a little more. I clenched my fists, knuckles turning white. I had spent 5 years being punished for something I didn't do. 5 years carrying the weight of a lie that had stolen everything from me. And now? Now I had a name. I took a deep breath, shoving the phone back into Emma's hands. I need to talk to Danny. She flinched. Nate, I don't care what you think, I snapped, the anger finally bubbling over. I have nothing left to lose. If he won't hear it from me, then he'll damn well hear it from her. Emma swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the phone. Then I'm coming with you. I hesitated. You don't have to. She let out a hollow laugh. Yes, I do. Because if I don't, if I let you go alone, I'll never forgive myself. I studied her, the exhaustion lining her face, the quiet determination in her eyes. And I nodded. Then let's end this. We drove in silence. Emma's hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white, and I couldn't blame her. Every mile we passed brought us closer to a truth neither of us were sure we could handle. I should have been planning what to say. I should have been bracing myself for Danny's inevitable refusal to believe me. Instead, my mind kept circling back to Olivia. Why? Why go through all the trouble? Why target me? And most importantly, what did she get out of it? The answer came sooner than I expected. Because when we pulled up outside Danny's house, Olivia was already there. And she was kissing him. Emma gasped. I just stared, my chest going tight. Danny and Olivia. Danny and the woman who had ruined my life. She hadn't just framed me. She had done it so she could have him for herself. Emma made a sound in the back of her throat, something between a gasp and a sob, before slapping a hand over her mouth. She wasn't just looking at betrayal. She was staring at the reason her life had been turned upside down, wrapped up in the same man who had destroyed mine. Danny and Olivia. The woman who had framed me. The cousin who had believed her over his own blood. And now, standing on his front porch, wrapped in each other like a couple in the honeymoon phase, they looked like they had no regrets. My stomach twisted into a cold knot of rage. Before Emma could stop me, I was already pushing out of the car, slamming the door behind me. Danny! I shouted. They broke apart like guilty teenagers caught sneaking around after curfew. Danny's face paled instantly. Olivia, on the other hand, didn't even look surprised. If anything, she looked satisfied. You have got to be kidding me, I growled, stalking toward them. Emma was only a step behind, her breath coming in ragged bursts. Danny squared his shoulders, his jaw tightening. What the hell are you doing here, Nate? I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, I don't know, Danny. Maybe I came to ask why you ruined my entire goddamn life over some fake messages, only to end up making out with the woman who sent them. His face twitched, but Olivia stepped forward before he could respond. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you're not welcome here, she said coolly. Emma was trembling beside me, hands clenched at her sides. How long? She demanded. Olivia arched an eyebrow. Excuse me? Emma took a step closer, eyes burning. How long have you been sleeping with him? Danny sucked in a sharp breath, but Olivia didn't even flinch. Oh, Emma, she sighed, like she was talking to a child. This isn't about you. It never was. Emma's face crumpled. Oh my God. I could feel my blood boiling. So that's it, huh? I said, turning to Danny. You threw me away, humiliated me, exiled me from my own family. All because she told you to? Danny's hands curled into fists, but he still wouldn't meet my eyes. You think I wanted to believe it, he muttered. I stared at him, disgust curling in my gut. No, Danny. I think you wanted an excuse to believe it. Silence. A flicker of guilt crossed his face, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. You were always the golden boy, Olivia said suddenly, her voice like poison dripping from honey. The family favorite, the one who could do no wrong. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. I just leveled the playing field. My hands clenched at my sides. You ruined my life for what? Some sick competition? She smiled. And I won. Before I could react, Emma did. She moved so fast I barely had time to process what was happening before her hand connected with Olivia's cheek in a loud, brutal slap. The sound echoed through the night. Olivia staggered back, eyes wide. Emma's voice shook, but there was fire in it. You didn't win, Olivia. You just made sure nobody else could be happy if you weren't. Olivia's hand flew to her cheek, but for the first time, she looked uncertain. Danny was still frozen, his gaze darting between us, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. I took a step forward, forcing him to meet my eyes. You took her word over mine, over Emma's, over the people who loved you. And for what? So you could end up right here? With her? Danny flinched. You don't get to fix this, I continued, my voice steady now, my anger cold and sharp. You don't get to suddenly say, oops, and expect everything to go back to the way it was. You made your choice. So live with it. I turned on my heel, walking back toward the car. Emma stood there a second longer, staring at the man she had once loved, the man who had thrown her away so easily. Then she turned and followed me. We got in the car, neither of us speaking. My hands were still shaking as I grabbed the wheel, my mind reeling. This should have felt like justice, like closure, but all I felt was hollow. As we drove away, Emma whispered, they deserve each other. I exhaled. Yeah, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They do. For the first time in 5 years, I felt something close to relief. Not satisfaction, not victory, just the weight of finally knowing. Danny had thrown me away for nothing. The people I had loved, the ones who had cut me out of their lives without a second thought, had done it all because of her. Because of Olivia's lies, because of her jealousy, because she wanted something and didn't care who she had to destroy to get it. And Danny had been more than willing to believe it. Emma was quiet beside me as we drove. I could still see the way her hands trembled in her lap, the way her nails dug into her skin. Her entire life had been stolen too, just as much as mine. Emma, I said finally, my voice hoarse. She didn't look at me, just kept staring out the window. I thought I'd be angrier, she admitted. I thought I'd want to scream at him, make him understand what he did to us. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. And she let out a hollow laugh. And I don't. I just want to forget he ever existed. I nodded slowly. That, at least, I understood. We rode in silence for a few more minutes before I spoke again. Where do we go from here? Emma exhaled, running a hand through her hair. I don't know. But I don't think I can stay here anymore. That hit harder than I expected. Brookhaven had never felt more suffocating. Everywhere I turned, I saw someone who had been part of my past, a past that was nothing but ashes now. Then let's go, I said. Emma turned to look at me. What? Let's leave. Get out of here. Go somewhere new. Somewhere where people don't know our names, where we don't have to live in the shadows of something we didn't even do. She studied me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, she nodded. Yeah, she whispered. Yeah, okay. A plan started forming in my mind. Seattle, maybe, or Denver, somewhere with fresh air and no ghosts. But before I could say anything else, my phone rang. I frowned, glancing at the screen. Blocked number. A chill ran down my spine. I hesitated, then picked up. Hello? There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then, Nate? My stomach twisted. My mother's voice. 5 years. 5 years of silence. 5 years of her pretending I didn't exist. And now, just like that, she was calling me? I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. What do you want? More silence. Then, a shaky inhale. We know the truth now. I closed my eyes. My fingers curled around the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. You what? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Her breath hitched. Danny, he told us. About Olivia. About everything. I let out a slow, bitter exhale. Took him long enough. Nate, she said, and for the first time, her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I laughed, short and humorless. Sorry. Sorry wouldn't give me back the 5 years I had lost. Sorry wouldn't erase the nights I spent wondering if I was truly the villain they had painted me to be. Sorry wouldn't change the fact that I had to build a whole new life because they had chosen to believe the worst of me. Why now? I asked coldly. She was silent. Then, because he's gone. My pulse stuttered. I sat up straighter, my grip on the phone tightening. What do you mean, gone? Danny, she whispered. He's missing. The world seemed to tilt. My heart slammed against my ribs. Emma must have seen the look on my face because she grabbed my arm. What is it? I didn't answer, because I was still staring at my phone, at my mother's name on the screen, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Danny was missing, and I had a sinking feeling that Olivia had something to do with it. I pulled the car over, my breathing shallow. Emma's hand was still gripping my arm, her fingers cold against my skin. What do you mean Danny's missing? I asked slowly. My mother's voice wavered. He hasn't been home for 2 days. Nobody's seen him. His phone goes straight to voicemail. Olivia says she doesn't know where he is, but she trailed off. But you don't believe her, I finished. A sharp inhale. No, not anymore. I let out a slow, bitter laugh. So now you think she's a liar? Now, when Danny's the one who's disappeared? Nate, please, she whispered. We just need to know if you've heard from him. I almost threw my phone out the window. After everything. After 5 years of treating me like I was nothing. Now they wanted my help? Emma was watching me, her expression unreadable. I could tell she wanted me to hang up, to drive away and leave all of this behind. But something in my gut told me this wasn't over. I haven't seen him, I said finally. But if he's really missing, I'd start looking at the person who spent years manipulating him. Olivia? My mother's voice was quiet now, unsure. Yeah, I said. Olivia. I ended the call before she could say anything else. For a long moment, neither Emma nor I spoke. Then she let out a breath. What now? I ran a hand down my face, trying to think. Danny disappearing right after we confronted him? That's not a coincidence. Emma nodded slowly. You think Olivia had something to do with it? I don't know, I admitted, but I wouldn't put anything past her. My mind was racing. Danny was gone. Olivia was the last person to see him, and something told me that if I wanted answers, I wasn't going to get them from my family. I needed to go to the source. I needed to talk to her. We drove straight to Olivia's apartment. I didn't know what I was expecting, but when we got there, the place was eerily quiet. The blinds were drawn. The only sign of life was her car still parked in the driveway. Emma shifted beside me. This feels off. I agreed. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the door and knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. Olivia, open up. Nothing. A chill ran down my spine. Emma bit her lip. Nate, maybe we should? The door opened. Olivia stood there, her dark hair messy, her eyes bloodshot. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. But when she saw me, she smiled, like she had been expecting me. Nate, she said, her voice smooth, eerily calm. I was wondering when you'd show up. I stiffened. Something was wrong. Where's Danny? I asked. Her smile widened. Oh, Nate, why do you always assume the worst of me? Emma made a sound of disgust. Because you're a lying psychopath? Olivia chuckled. That's not very nice, Emma. Then she leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. Danny left. That's all I know. Bullshit, I snapped. You did something to him. She sighed, shaking her head. I didn't do anything, Nate. But he's gone. And honestly, she tilted her head. I don't think he's coming back. My stomach turned. I took a step forward, but Olivia didn't back down. You spent years destroying my life, I said, my voice low. And now Danny's missing right after we confronted you. Where is he? For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Annoyance? Amusement? I couldn't tell. Then she smiled again. Wouldn't you like to know? Emma's hand found mine, squeezing tight. I could feel the tension radiating off her. This wasn't just about Danny anymore. This was about her. About whatever twisted game Olivia had been playing for the past 5 years. And now, for some reason, she looked like she was winning. That a slow, creeping dread settled into my bones as Olivia's smile stretched across her face. There was something deeply wrong about how calm she was, how pleased she looked. Danny was missing, and she wasn't afraid. That alone told me everything I needed to know. You think this is a joke? I asked, voice low. Danny is gone. You were the last person to see him, and you're standing here smiling like it's some kind of sick game. Olivia tilted her head, her dark eyes glittering. Maybe it is a game, Nate. Emma exhaled sharply beside me, barely holding herself together. Where is he? Olivia sighed dramatically. I told you. He left. He was upset, emotional. He stormed out, said he needed time to think. I haven't heard from him since. I narrowed my eyes. And you expect us to believe that? She shrugged. Believe what you want. Doesn't change the truth. Every instinct in my body screamed that she was lying. Danny was hot-headed, sure, but disappearing completely? No calls, no texts, nothing? That wasn't like him. Even when he was furious, he always reached out to someone. But no one had heard from him. Because he couldn't reach out. Something had happened to him. Something that Olivia wasn't saying. I stepped closer. What did you do to him? Olivia's smirk faltered just slightly, but she recovered quickly. I didn't do anything, Nate. Her gaze flickered to Emma, then back to me. But if you want to go digging, be careful. You might not like what you find. A cold chill ran down my spine. Emma's grip on my hand tightened. We're calling the cops, she said firmly. Now. Something in Olivia's expression shifted. The smirk vanished. Her face darkened, her lips pressing into a thin line. You really don't want to do that, she said softly. I stiffened. Was that a threat? Emma pulled out her phone anyway, her fingers shaking as she dialed. I watched Olivia carefully, waiting for some reaction, some sign of panic. But there was none. She just smiled again, her eyes flicking between us like we were chess pieces on a board she already controlled. And that was when I realized. She wasn't scared of the cops. She had already planned for this. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. The call connected. Yes, I'd like to report a missing person, Emma said, voice strong despite her trembling hands. Danny Carter. He. But before she could finish, Olivia let out a quiet laugh. Emma faltered. What's so funny? Olivia tucked her arms behind her back and rocked on her heels. You really think I didn't prepare for this? She tilted her head. Danny's gone. No sign of struggle. No forced entry. And when the cops come knocking on my door, guess who I'll say threatened me the day before he disappeared? My blood ran cold. Emma's hand clenched around her phone. You wouldn't. Olivia's eyes glittered with something dark, something victorious. I would. And I will. My heart pounded against my ribs. We had walked right into a trap. Olivia had been playing this game for years, weaving lies into truth so seamlessly that even our own family had turned against us. And now? Now she had the perfect cover. If the cops came looking, she'd play the scared, innocent victim. She'd paint Danny as unstable, emotional, dangerous. She'd claim we had come to her house, yelled at her, threatened her. And then, she'd sit back and watch as we took the fall. I forced myself to stay calm, to push down the burning anger clawing at my chest. Because anger wouldn't save Danny. Anger wouldn't fix this. I turned to Emma. Hang up. She hesitated. Nate. Hang up. Her fingers clenched around the phone, but after a beat, she ended the call. Olivia grinned. Smart boy. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to do something. But right now, she had the upper hand, and we couldn't afford to make a wrong move. Emma was shaking with barely contained fury. "We're not done with this," she spat. Olivia just chuckled. "Oh, I think you are." She leaned against the doorframe, her eyes shining with something twisted. "Now be good little outcasts and stay gone." And with that, she slammed the door in our faces. The drive back to my apartment was dead silent. Emma stared out the window, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought she might shatter her teeth. My hands were gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. When we finally pulled into my parking lot, she turned to me. "We have to do something." I exhaled shakily, running a hand down my face. "I know." But Olivia had left us no good options. Call the cops? She'd twist the story. Confront her again? She'd use it against us. Wait, Danny might never be found. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to think. And then, a memory. Danny at his house, right before we confronted him. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't know where to start. Like he was hesitating. He had known. He had realized what Olivia had done. And if he had figured it out, then maybe, just maybe, he left something behind. I looked up, meeting Emma's eyes. "I think Danny left us a clue." Her brows furrowed. "What?" "He knew Olivia set us up," I said. "He realized it. And then he vanished. But what if he left something behind? Something we can use?" Emma sucked in a breath, the wheels in her head turning. "You want to break into his house," she guessed. I hesitated. "I want to find answers." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Then let's do it." That night, we broke into Danny's house. And what we found changed everything.